Do you want to be ahead of the game for the latest in arts, music, cuisine, and entertainment across the Middle East's most dynamic capital cities? Al Monitor is proud to launch our City Pulse newsletters, focused exclusively on local news, starting in Riyadh, Dubai, Istanbul, and Doha. Each week, our on-the-ground writers in these cities cover the latest cultural happenings and trends, so you have everything you need to know for the best local experiences. To subscribe for free, go to almonitor.com, that's al-monitor.com, and sign up on our newsletter page.
Welcome back to the Al Monitor Brief. I'm Adam Lucente. January 11th marked 23 years since the first detainees were brought to Guantanamo Bay. Just 15 detainees remain in the U.S. military detention facility, down from a peak of nearly 680 in 2003. Last week, a group of 11 inmates from Yemen were transferred to custody in Oman. U.S. President Joe Biden pledged to close Guantanamo Bay, but with just a few days left in his presidency, it remains open, albeit with a smaller population. As former President Donald Trump prepares to return to the White House, the future of Guantanamo Bay remains unclear. My guest this week is Al Monitor's news reporter Rosaleen Carroll. Rosaleen recently wrote an in-depth analysis of the reasons Guantanamo Bay remains open and the prospects for its closing, and helps make sense of the issues at play. Hope you enjoy. Rosaleen, welcome back to the Al Monitor Brief.
Thanks, I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, thanks for your interesting reporting on this subject. So my first question is, could you just take us through the main reasons that Guantanamo Bay remains open despite, efforts to close it and inmates being transferred out of it?
Sure. So the biggest logistical hurdle that remains in the way of Guantanamo closing is Congress. Every year, Congress signs the National Defense Authorization Act, and within that act, there are a few provisions which apply to Guantanamo. The first is an extension of prohibition on funds to construct or modify facilities in the U.S. To house detainees transferred from Guantanamo. And what this means is that detainees cannot be housed on U.S. soil. So whichever administration is in power then must turn to other countries and ask them to take these detainees. Obviously, this can be very hard for some high-profile detainees who are considered politically toxic, but even for lower-profile detainees, this is difficult too. The U.S. just released 11 detainees to Oman, but this was a multi-year process of negotiations, and the administration had to navigate political headwinds in Congress. And then another smaller difficulty is the prohibition of releasing detainees to certain countries, which has included, for example, Libya, Syria, and Yemen, active conflict zones. In fact, the detainees recently released were all Yemeni, but couldn't be released into Yemen because of this prohibition in the NDAA, which is meant to ensure that post-release monitoring goes smoothly, or goes at all, really. Ultimately, though, what I've learned by speaking with experts and through research is that Guantanamo can be closed. The U.S. president can defy Congress, which is unlikely, but a president can also try to circumnavigate or change the provisions in the NDAA. One of the experts I spoke with, Dr. Karen Greenberg, made the point that it all boils down to will. It's a matter of willpower.
Thank you. Yeah, I was going to ask about, whether the president could just override that. So glad you brought that up. So there's 15 people still there. Can you tell us who are the people still interned in Guantanamo Bay and why are they still there?
So it's the smallest the population there has ever been. 7 of them have been charged, some of whom await sentencing by a military commission, and then 6 others remain uncharged. Of the 6 men, 3 of them are eligible for a transfer, and 3 are eligible to go before something called the Periodic Review Board, which is a body that basically facilitates the transfer process. Among the detainees is Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the alleged mastermind behind the September 11th attack. His plea deal was just blocked by the Biden administration last week. He was expected to plead guilty in return for his death penalty being withdrawn. And there's another defendant also in the September 11th case, Walid bin Atash, who is 45. He had a similar agreement that was also blocked. The longest serving prisoner is a man named Ali Hamza al-Bahlul, who was brought to the base the day the prison opened in January of 2002. He's the only prisoner there currently serving a sentence of life in prison. There are a few others. One was set to be transferred to Iraq, but he and his lawyers filed to block that transfer by claiming inhumane treatment in Iraqi prisons. There's two, I believe, people deemed forever prisoner. Someone who has not committed a crime, but who has been deemed too dangerous to release. One of those is Abu Zubaydah. He's a Palestinian man who's been detained for 23 years, whose attorney I spoke with during my research. Recently, a panel of UN experts and legal and human rights scholars have written to Biden asking him to pardon Zubaydah. He was the first 9/11 detainee to be tortured in so-called black sites, which are secret foreign CIA prisons. And he was initially described by the US as one of al-Qaeda's top leaders, but later intelligence conceded that he didn't know anything about the 9/11 attacks and may not have ever been a member of al-Qaeda. So that's why people are petitioning for his pardon. So those are just a few of the inmates left.
Don't go anywhere. We'll be back with Rosaleen after this short break.
Today's transformation of the Middle East is at the center of global geopolitics. Whether you're an analyst, diplomat, executive, or academic, you need the best reporting and analysis to understand what's really happening on the ground and what it means for the world. Al-Monitor is the award-winning independent leader in Middle East news. From Riyadh to Beirut, Abu Dhabi to Doha, and Baghdad to Tehran, our team of over 100 expert journalists report daily on the top stories driving the regional trends. Download our mobile app and subscribe to Al-Monitor to follow what leaders and decision makers are reading every day. Go to almonitor.com, that's AL-MONITOR.com, and use promo code POD25, POD25 for a discount.
And we're back. Rosaleen, we're just a few days from former President Donald Trump returning to the White House. What are the possible outcomes for Guantanamo under the incoming Trump administration?
Well, either Guantanamo closes or it doesn't. I think it's a matter of where Trump's attention lies. Guantanamo hasn't been high on the docket in years. It has faded out of headlines and out of the American imagination. So if Trump continues in that way, there's a possibility, Dr. Greenberg told me, that he will just let things play out and people could slowly be transferred out. But another attorney I spoke with, Joseph Margulies, said there is zero chance that the facility will be closed in the near future. So there's also that possibility, the possibility that Trump will keep it open intentionally. When he first entered office, he signed an executive order which basically reversed an executive order by Obama in 2008 to close the prison. And that order that Trump signed also implied that there could be future detainees brought to Guantanamo Bay. But obviously Trump continued in the tradition of Obama by bringing no new detainees there. So I think it's just a matter of bandwidth, attention, bandwidth, and political will.
Rosaleen, thanks so much for joining us with your insights and for your reporting on this subject.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Al-Monitor Brief. Follow Al-Monitor for more on the stories impacting the Middle East.